Okay, so we're going to start with slope, basic as we can. Basic definition of slope. Rise over run. I'm going to show you that because as you get farther in math, those triangles start appearing. Those triangles mean change in.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure if you hadn't seen those before, that you start seeing them because those will start appearing more and more and more and more. We get always hung up on the x and y, but really what we care about is the fact that we have the dependent and independent. X is the one that we get to choose. Y is the one that depends on what we chose for the x. Okay, all that's well and good. What we really care about today, we're going to get to this, just not so much today. What we care about today is this. Your basic equation for slope. And a lot of times people get hung up on the little 2's and the little 1's. Those don't matter. All that matters is whichever order pair you choose to go into that equation first, you use that equation for both the y and the x. Doesn't matter whenever I come down here if this is x2, y2, or if this is x2 or y2. It doesn't matter what order I put them in. Okay, so if I find slope for example 1, it's going to be -8/3. And again, just to prove it real quick, just in case you've had detrimental math classes. If I do it the other way, I still get -8/3. Doesn't matter which direction or which order pair you choose to go first, just as long as that order pair goes first for both the x and the y.
So I can't do the first one for the x and then the second
Nope.
one? Okay.
Nope, you can't switch order pairs. If you choose the 4, -2 to go first, it has to go first for both x and y.
Alright.
Because if I switch in the denominator, then it would make it positive. So then I wouldn't get the same slope.
That makes sense.
Okay, so there's slope. Now we're going to talk about types of equations for a line. So now we're going to switch to linear equations now that we know what slope is. Okay, the first one is worthless. They talk about it all the time, but it's entirely worthless. No one ever uses it. It's standard form. We're going to talk about it because it is a form for a linear equation, but it's worthless. I'm never going to give you 2 order pairs and say, find me the standard form of an equation. No. It's pointless. If you're given the standard form, I'm going to show you how to use it to graph. But beyond that, it's worthless. So that's standard form. Now, to use it, let's say that I have an equation over here.
Can you move it up?
Yeah, sorry. There you go. That's all the farther I'll move. I'll try to write towards the top. Let's say I have that equation. Now, there's no reason to change it into slope-intercept form or anything like that to graph it. It's actually really easy to graph in this form. What you do is you find your intercepts. We talked about those yesterday. If I want my x-intercept, what do I do with my y? Make it 0. So if y is 0, pretty much that means that that part disappears, right? So what is x equal to? -3. So my x-intercept is -3. Okay, if I want my y-intercept, that means x is 0, so that part disappears. So what's my y-intercept? I did that wrong, sorry. Okay, what's my y-intercept? -2. That is a bad point, bad point. Okay, so there's my line. There's no reason to do a whole lot of messing around with the equation or anything. You can just graph it like that. But at the same time, there's no reason to mess around with an equation to make it look like that so you can graph with intercepts. So, there's standard form. Again, pretty much worthless. All right, however, while we are on standard form, anyone still need that? While we're still on standard form, I'm going to talk about example 2 and 3 there. A lot of people mix those up, forget how to do those, that kind of thing. They know that they're supposed to be horizontal and vertical lines. Half the time they forget which one horizontal and vertical is. But they know that they're supposed to be horizontal. Yeah, there's a new word. It's supposed to be horizontal. One of those two, horizontal or horizontal. Okay, so what I'm suggesting is use what we just did with standard form. So if I take that first one, what's my x-intercept? 3. What's my y-intercept? There isn't one. It can't be 0, because that would say that y equals 0. There is no y-intercept. So how do I draw a line through this dot that does not intersect the y-axis? Straight up and down. So if you have any difficulties, that's kind of a, whenever I was learning how to do this and I was struggling with it, that's kind of how I tried to help myself. If you don't have any issues with it, then good for you. So y, I kind of did the same thing with y. What's the y-intercept? -4. There's no x in there, so I have to be able to draw a line through that dot that does not touch the x-axis. Okay, slope-intercept form. My goal is to get this far, example 6, so we don't have a whole lot farther. And then you'll have time to work on homework. Okay, so we have 2 more forms. Slope-intercept form is semi-worthless. So if you standard form was worthless, slope-intercept form is mostly worthless. The reason is, most of the time, you don't have what you need for slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is the one that looks like this. So you need slope, and you need your y-intercept. %90 of the time, you don't have those things if you were given a real-world problem. I mean, a lot of times you have your y-intercept because it's pretty easy to get your y-intercept because that's just whenever your value hits 0. So getting your y-intercept's not bad, but you don't have your slope anyway. You have to calculate your slope. So point slope form is usually a lot better than slope intercept form anyway. Most of your problems in your book where you have to find slope intercept form, what they do is they tell you m equals this, your y-intercept equals this, write your equation. They're like super easy problems. So I'm not even going to worry about going through those. If you need to graph one, you take your y-intercept, you plot your y-intercept, and then you use your slope to go up or down and over. And you graph your line. Again, I'm not going to worry about examples of those because those are the ones that have been like pounded into your head over and over and over and over again. What I want to do is point slope form because those are the ones that in further math classes you're going to have to use over and over and over again, and they have rarely even touched on or covered hardly at all. You know, occasionally they'll give you a few problems over them and then move on. Okay, so point slope form looks like this. It's really just your slope formula, and you take the x's from the bottom and multiply them to the other side. That's where it comes from. It's just instead of having the y2 and the x2, we turn them into solid variables because we want them to stay there, so we have a formula that we can plug numbers into after we're done. And what we do is we plug slope into there, and we plug some random ordered pair into there, x1, y1. So we're not limited to having to know our y-intercept. We can know any ordered pair that we want to. So then when we go to graph it, we graph it very similar to how you've graphed slope-intercept form all this time. It's just you take, and you can start at any point. And then from that random point, you use your slope to go up and over to get your next point. Some point that's on your line. It just doesn't have to be on your axis. It'll be a point that's on your line. It'll be the point from your equation.
Oh.
It's not just some point that you made up.
See, that's what I thought you were
No. It's not some point that we made up. But it doesn't have to be so specific that it has to be on your y-axis. Okay, so I want to do a couple examples and then we're done. We good? Okay, I'm going to let you guys try the graphing on your own. If you have questions about the graphing, we can go over the graphing later. Most of the time, people are okay with graphing. Or if they have issues, they're usually small issues. So I'm counting on that. But again, if you have issues, just let me know. We'll cover them. Okay, I'm going to start with the basic and work up to the harder. Okay, so basic formula. Again, I'm starting really low because a lot of this depends on who your math teacher was, how much of this you got beforehand. Some math teachers cover this in depth, some math teachers don't even touch it. Alright, so I go to plug these things in. So I have y minus, now if I do minus negative 3, that's going to end up being plus 3. Equals, I put my slope in there, then x minus 4. So in your formula, your ordered pair always looks opposite of what it looked like outside your formula, because of these minus signs in our formula. So my 4 looks like a negative 4, my negative 3 looks like a positive 3. Now, some people have also had it pounded into their heads that every time I write a linear equation, it has to be in the form y equals mx plus b. This said, write an equation. There's an equation. I'm done. I don't have to go any farther. Unless it tells me to, I am done. That is an entirely valid equation. So, right now I'm trying to deprogram you. If you've had one of those teachers that has made you solve for y every single time you've done one of these, you do not have to. So, same thing on the next one. Write an equation. Now, this time I'm not given slope, so my first step is to find the slope. So, let's see, negative 1 minus negative 3 over 2 minus 5. So 2 over negative 3. Whenever I go to write my equation, I have two possibilities now. Now, you should know that you have two possibilities, but it is not your job to write down the two possibilities. It's my job to check for the two possibilities, if that makes sense. And actually, whenever I'm grading your papers, since some of you have been programmed to solve for y, I always have to check for three possibilities. But your two possibilities would be this. And this, and it just depends on which order pair you chose. They are both the exact same equation. Because if I solve for y, I will get the same answer. And some of you that have been programmed, you will solve for y without even realizing you're doing it. Because you've been forced to do that. And then you'll get your y value, and then you'll hate yourself for doing that because you did a whole bunch of extra work. And then you'll realize it after you did it. But I will check for all the answers, all the possible answers. You just have to have one. It said write an equation. So there's an equation, and if you solve for y, there's a third possibility. If you really get sadistic on yourself, you can put it in standard form. Okay, so last one. I will occasionally ask you to put it in slope-intercept form. That is just to test your algebra skills. So if you do have an equation that asks you to do it, you do need to do it. It is a valid skill to have. I'm just not going to make you do it every time. I didn't try this one first, so I don't know how ugly it's going to get. Okay, pick one, doesn't matter, because they'll both come out to be the same. Wow, this one's going to be ugly. Okay, first step, whenever I'm wanting to solve for y, is I need to distribute my slope into the x's. Okay, and then I need to add that 4 to the other side. Okay, so 4 is the same thing as 25ths. So that's going to be 24 fifths. Or I guess you could do 4 and 4 fifths. I just always like having an improper fraction. I'm going to do this real quick. You don't even have to write this down. Some people sometimes don't believe that they'll come out to be the same. So just to prove it real quick, let's see, minus 6 fifths. So whenever I add 6 to both sides, 6 is going to be 30 fifths. So 30 minus 6 is 24 fifths again. Okay, so I know this might be a little low for some of you, sorry.